what would be your decision if you could decide between total isolation and lockdown and letting everyone continue to live their life as normal? You, one person.
Well,
if you were crisis manager for the whole world on coronavirus.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Well, look, well, I mean, I think, and I'm absolutely no expert, I think when this is all done, you look at the number of people that die as a result of this, and the number of people that die anyway, and the number of people who will die because the hospitals are full of people who are being dealt with as a priority, and the number of people who will have serious mental health issues as a result of lockdown. And you will have to balance that. And I'm not saying, and by the way, I'm in a high risk group because I have a heart condition. So if I get it, I'm in really serious trouble. So individually, you know, I think different people have to have different approaches to it. I think as we look at this afterwards, we may find that actually there's been an overreaction and that this lockdown has caused more problems than it solved. And I think it'll be very interesting to, you know, compare Sweden with the rest of the world to see whether or not the lockdowns were really effective. Having said that, I started by saying I'm no expert, and it's pretty obvious that all of the health systems couldn't deal with the front end of the tsunami of cases.
Absolutely.
So this whole idea that they want to, you know, flatten it out and also to buy time to try and come up with medication and with vaccine. You know, we're not going to be locked down for a year and a half while we wait for a vaccine, but it may well be that, and I've seen some work on that says that the malarial stuff does actually work in combination with antibiotics. And so if that work gets going and helps save lives, and we have to be locked down for a period of time, well, I mean, that may make sense. So individually, I think everybody, and of course, there isn't an individually, you know, if you're with someone, then the commitment has to be everybody in this house is locked down. And of course, the problem with that is kids, the problem that is people, you know, who are a different generation, all of that stuff is difficult. But it's, I mean, one of the things it does is it forces people to acknowledge the status of their relationships.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, some people probably never spent 5 hours in a row with these people, and now they're spending, you know, just about every waking hour. It is an interesting test.
Well, and sorry, I just want to make, you know, and I'm with my partner, and she's an artist, and so we have very syncopated lives. We also have a very large and airy apartment, and we have none of the physical claustrophobia that people must be going through. And I think people who have no access to funds, who are locked in a room, you know, those people are on the edge. And I mean, I think if you're the mayor of Naples, or, you know, you've got some really hard decisions, because if you keep this going, people are going to be on the street, whether you want them to be on the street or not, because they're going to be rioting. So, and my sister lives in Cape Town, and, you know, if that starts in the black townships, it's seen as a European disease. And then you have the whole issue of race and how does that get played out? So, yeah, watch this space. I think this is a very, very tough year.
I'm afraid that you're right. I want to, you know, I kind of want to go back to one of the things that you started talking about. I'm sitting here, you know, with equal parts trepidation about all of the things that you're talking about, especially for, you know, the huge numbers of people who don't have the ability to Zoom into work and don't have the ability to fill their larder whenever they want, and so on and so forth. But I also feel like this kind of excitement, because, you know, I know from the crises that I've been through, you know, even just the ones in Russia, 98, 2008, and 2014, I was in Silicon Valley when that bubble burst. And so I feel like kind of like this crisis automatically means that there are big opportunities. And so I feel like it's a great time to be thinking about, how does the world change after this? How does my business change? How should I be different a year from now, and start to do that work to get there now? I'm wondering how it looks like from your from your vantage point?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've got to be careful here because, you know, I'm at a, how do I put this politely? I'm at a different stage of my career, as in the end of it, or in fact, past the end of it. So, you know, my personal attitude to some of this stuff is going to be different from yours. But let me just start by saying that, you know, when I teach leadership and I talk about the skills separate from the characteristics of leadership, and then how people acquire these characteristics. And characteristics are choice. You know, skills you learn, characteristics are how you live your life and the choices that you make. And one of the things that, one of the theories that attracted me was the idea that we go through these crucibles of experience, these crucibles being periods where we change in terms of our characteristics and that give us the opportunity to really grow and to really move forward, not in increments, but actually step change in terms of some of the core characteristics that you need as a leader. And there are three types. There's the new crucible where you've never done it before. There's a reversal, which is actually a nice way of saying failure. And then there's suspension, which is when things aren't going to be the same in the future that they were in the past. And I think for everybody, this is a new crucible. This is something that they've never been through before. This generation has never had, you know, all the international borders closed, has never been forced physically indoors. I mean, this is really extreme. And therefore, and by the way, there's no guarantee on a crucible that you know, it isn't an automatic pass. You can fail. And a lot of people, unfortunately, will fail the test. But for those that take on the challenge and accept the opportunities that it creates, when this is over, they will be far stronger than they were, you know, before it started. And when you talk about, you know, looking for the opportunities, I mean, even if I take a simple thing like my birthday party, which I had on Zoom, you know, when I've had birthday parties, I always like to get a lot of people, but I've never had a party where I've been able to connect all my friends around the world to the same event. And, you know, to have 35 people from 4 continents was really very special. You know, I'm okay, that's a rather, you know, trite example, but it does show that, you know, on the one hand, we've lost that physical contact, which is terrible because you know, as you know, Dan, I'm basically a party planner. And, you know, so I miss that. And I think I'm going to have to miss that for some time. But on the other hand, here's another thing that, you know, we can do. And this whole communication that's going on now through this medium is opening opportunities which we couldn't have imagined before. I mean, there's a slight overdose at the moment of sort of webinars, and you know, I could spend literally all day looking at other people's webinars. Well, either looking at them or giving them. So I think there's a slight, you know, where people are kind of getting into this new phase. But there's no doubt that, you know, when I do a committee, I'll be doing one next week on the economy, or even when I did my lecture yesterday, there were 200 people on the call. It just the bandwidth, the amount, your ability to cover a much bigger audience is there. Of course, you're not doing it in person, but you're doing it in a far broader audience than you would otherwise do, and I think that's very valuable. As far as business plans and opportunities, absolutely. You know, here's my $1 million idea, which I will share with you, and you can then execute it and make $1 million. We all need virtual reality headsets, except they won't be virtual reality. They won't be these big ones, but they'll be just little, you know, blacked out glasses. And we will then create a cocktail party of our avatars in a nice environment. We'd create the environment, decorate it with things that we know, pictures on the walls that are our pictures. So that's our living room. And then we'll be able to walk around the room and connect one-on-one with people we want to talk to. And so then you'll have the 35 people in the room, but they won't all have to talk to me. You know, they can talk to each other without me sort of being there. The only problem with this concept is the pretty girl in the corner will have a huge group of people around her, and I'll be standing on the other side with nobody talking to me. But we'll get over that. That's just. But I just think that any technological advance that lets people experience what they were experiencing before is something that people are going to be desperate to find. So yes, I think that there are plenty of opportunities.
One of the things that you raised, which I think is interesting, is we've gone from a world where we were able to, and again, we're in the fortunate class of people who could do this, to at a moment's notice go to London or Singapore or Cape Town or New York, it strikes me, on the one hand, we live in a world where national borders are increasingly irrelevant. We have a globalized economy, supply chain stretched over continents. We have people who live and work and travel very frequently to foreign countries. The virus obviously doesn't care about national borders. And yet the first reaction of most countries was to actually close the borders. Do you think that there's a permanent change in what we understand as globalization? Does the world take a step back from this sort of headlong rush to a globally integrated economy, or do you think that this is just kind of a hiccup that we bump over and forget about in a year?
Yeah, well, let me make a couple of comments. Absolutely not a temporary hiccup. I mean, absolutely, there are fundamental changes going on, and some of them are non-reversible. But I would want to make the first comment I'd want to make is, actually, if you looked at it, we were actually reinventing borders before this virus turned up. I mean, if you just take the concept of technological sovereignty, the idea that data is power, and that the sovereigns wanted to control where that data was actually located. You started to, I was already, one of the other directorships I have is Skolkovo, and I was already hosting a debate last year. Do you need total borderless environments to maintain best in class? And the answer is yes, you do. If you're trying to have the best product set, you need access to global best in class. But as we were going through this over the last few years, you can see, take Russia as an example, where the sovereign control of data was becoming a priority for the authorities, and the control over the internet at some point was going to become a priority for the authorities. And so there was already this move to put back in the barriers. And then if you look at Trump and America for the Americans, and ignoring the world order, you can see that there were these movements already at work. And what had been this enormous rush to globalization, people were already looking at it. And then, so then the next stage, which was actually a logical thing, which was to stop all international travel, that will reinforce that perspective. And travel will, because of the syncopated nature of the rollout of the virus, and the fact that not all countries are at the same stage of the virus, and that some countries are opening up before others, and that will keep going, you will have to have a mechanism in place to maintain the fact that you have made this advance if you're a sovereign. And that means that the international travel will continue to be controlled. And I don't know what it's going to look like, and I don't know whether or not you have to have some sort of test, have a test that proves you're negative within 24 hours of travel or something like that. So that the only way you get on a plane is if the other people on the plane know that they're not sitting in a tube getting infected by one person inside a enclosed tube for 10 hours of flight. I mean, this is going to be very complicated. So yes, I think this is not a hiccup. This is a step change. And then the question is, were we a little too, well, I think we were basically spoiled. You know, I've got a house in France. I just go to France whenever I want. My son's in the States, you know, my sister's in Cape Town. You know, we all fly around the world thinking that there are no borders. But actually, the fact is, you know, if this was 70 years ago, we wouldn't have been flying around like that anyway. And so I think we're going to have to roll back some of the expectation that we have, and we're going to have to be more careful how we plan. And be prepared to make the compromises. You know, do I see my family because they're co-located with me, or do we, just like, you know, 70 years ago, people go off and then they go off and they build their careers or whatever they do, and you see them occasionally. It's difficult, particularly, you know, for me and my son, for instance, but that's the way I think the world is going to go.
Mm-hmm.